Greetings to all, and it's a great privilege to welcome our experienced and esteemed speaker for this evening, Anusha Dasarathi. I have a distinct pleasure and privilege of having spent 2 full days with Anusha and her team member Asta online during an idea training program, and it was a wonderful experience and learned a lot with them together. So I would like to just introduce today's topic for the webinar. It's data analytics through idea, a winning strategy for internal audit case studies. And we have Anusha Dasarathi, the group head of internal audit for Sanat, a Mubadala Company from the Middle East, taking us through the 59th webinar in the Analytics Wednesday series. The series is supported by the Government of Canada Trade Commissioner Service, and we've been very fortunate to have 58 very insightful, engaging sessions, and I'm sure today's will be nonetheless. I would like to just take a minute and introduce our attendees to the company Sama Audit Systems and Softwares Private Limited. We've been leaders in the space of data analytics. Caseware Idea is our flagship product. We also have Lex Comply, which is a legal compliance management system. We have Alisa from Tier 1 Financial Solutions, which is a continuous control monitoring solution. And very recently, Caseware Working Papers has been a recent addition to our basket of audit tools and solutions. Now, I have the distinct privilege of introducing our speaker for this evening. Anusha is academically a CIA, a CRM, FCA, CFE, and a master's in commerce. She's the group head of internal audit at Sanat, which is an extensive company in Middle East, a Mubadala Company, an accomplished and result-focused senior management professional with 20 plus years of experience and diverse roles across organizational hierarchy, as well as a chartered accountant in practice in India. Having demonstrated expertise in risk management, internal auditing, consulting, and training with major corporate groups, including KPMG, Mubadala, the investment arm of the Abu Dhabi government, and Etihad Aviation Group, she has a track record of successfully working on international assignments of aircraft maintenance reviews for Air Serbia and Air Seychelles, and also airport station reviews in Greece for Etihad Airways. Having worked with renowned clientele in India, including Semcorp Logistics, the Board of Control for Cricket in India, ITC Group, Nike's Footwear, Sterlite Industries, and Orchid Chemicals, and also has an active social response, also takes part in active social responsibility initiatives, including international volunteering, blogging on social subjects. She's a life coach. She has her own website, www.candidthought.com, and she also writes very regularly in national Gulf newspapers. So with that very, very interesting and extensive repertoire, I would like to welcome Anusha to today's session and also welcome all the attendees. Anusha, over to you. We are very excited to hear your session today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jairam. Thank you so much. Just a small correction. I'm not anymore being that frequent in writing to the national newspapers. and also my blog, it's high time I write the next one. But the work has been pretty tight. So let's see how that goes. Okay, sure, without any further ado, let me just share my screen.
Yes, please.
Please let me know when the screen is visible.
I'll do that, sure. Yes, please, your screen's visible. Thank you.
Right, okay. Thank you for that introduction. So how we are going to plan our session for today is going to be, let's talk about the most interesting topic. That's it's two topics dwelled in one, and quite interestingly so, winning internal audit strategies. That by itself, it's a big topic to talk about. And data analytics, again, two individual strong topics combined in one. I have the pleasure of putting them together. Thanks to Jairam for giving this opportunity. So how we would be going about this session is I will be talking through this topic, and I will be having a few surveys to have our audience also engaged. So just let's also, it's a elite group of professionals. So let's also hear from our audience how they actually see this particular topic from their perspective or from their experiences. I'll also be sharing some surveys and insights. And last but not least, to give some experiences that we've had in our internal audit profession using IDEA as part of our internal audit work. So that's how we will go over today's session. Okay, to start with, so a little background about who we are and what is Sanat. Since, as Jairam has already mentioned, the Mubadala Company, it's an investment arm, but more specifically, what is Sanat? Sanat is an integrated service provider. Our specializations in the area of aviation industry, more into leasing and an MRO work for engine maintenance. So typically, we are engaging with OEMs. So when you are sitting on an aircraft, you'll be seeing the comfort of the seat, and probably I'll be seeing through the window to see what engine it is. So we work for we do the maintenance, repair, and overall work for GE engines, Rolls-Royce Trent 700 engines, and V2500 engines. And we also have a small arm in terms of gas turbine engines as well, which caters to the oil and gas sector. It's just a little bit of background about we as a company. It's a 30-year-old company in terms of it runs in decades. So it's 500 plus engines that has been overhauled. So we work with a lot of data, and that's one. And we work with way too many regulations. So it's a mixed blend of these two things. So within it, it's very interesting how internal audit fits in, because it's already a highly regulated environment. So there are external regulators who are continuously performing audits. There are customer audits that get performed. There are supplier audits that get performed. And there are internal quality assurance providers. So a lot of times there is an overlap that we come across with because they are also looking at similar areas in the operations. So it becomes interesting. And why I'm giving so much background is it's basically these things are pretty similar in other manufacturing industries as well. And what becomes important is how do internal audit differentiates itself and how we can do that value add. That's really when the winning strategies come into play. So what's the overlay? So that's basically what we can see how much we can touch upon today. So before I start, I just wanted to get an insight of our audience as well. So I would kindly request our audience to just join this poll. So you have you can join by just using it in your mobile. Just go into that site, put the code, and you can talk about, okay, it is coming here. Sorry, give me a second. Sorry for the glitch, because I am getting it in my other screen.
We are able to see the code on your screen.
You're able to see the code. Okay.
Yes, we can see the website slido.com and the code.
Okay, so can I just ask you to, so I'll, because I'm trying to see if I can move the screen to show the results, but for some reason I'm not able to. So pardon me, you'll have to trust me when I'm going to give you numbers on it. So sure. So if you're able to see the screen and the code, just please apply the code and vote how big is your internal audit team. And I'm expecting that there can be professionals who want to have a sneak peek on internal audit. So please feel free. So you can always mark the NA there.
Great.
Okay. So I'll give it a 1 or 2. I'll just probably give a few seconds to see if we have other audience coming in. Okay, excellent. Just the numbers are populating. Okay, Jairam, can I ask you how many attendees we have today?
So Anusha, we have 8 at the moment on Zoom, and we have 5 on YouTube.
Okay. Okay.
So all the 13 are receiving you, and I can see 4 have attempted the first poll. At least I can see that on my screen.
Okay. Okay. So I don't think the others have attempted it in that case. So, okay, let's stop the poll there. But I have an interesting outcome. So it's a clear no 25% across each category. That's a very interesting outcome to have. No, we have if you've said that 4 have no, in that case we have it's a very interesting spread. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we talk about winning strategies, how can we talk about winning strategies without we talking about what is internal audit all? No, what's our goals, what's our mission and delivery, and how else can we speak except without touching upon the IPPF standards itself? So that's the what does our IPPF standards say? It is more to enhance and protect organizational value by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice, and insight. So dwelling a little bit of a thought into it, the very basis for this is largely from the perspective of who our stakeholders are and understanding our stakeholders' needs. That comes as a pretty much as a basis, as a start of point. Identifying stakeholders is one of the preliminary or the most primitive thing that we have to do before we actually decide how we can come about with the winning strategies that will work for our internal audit function. Knowing our stakeholders and understanding their needs forms the very basis for what would be the internal audit's mission, values, and delivery for each of our internal audit functions. So that's basically dwelled into with the delivery lines in the lines of assurance, advice, and insight. Why do we say assurance, advice, and insight? So objective assurance, that's our bread and butter. Giving a risk-based objective assurance audits, that our bread and butter. But are we in the same environment of business as we were yesterday as a compliance environment? Not anymore. Right now, our environment is more, they ask for more. There is, you have to do more with less. That's the expectation. So that's a common expectation across our stakeholders, where they look at internal audit as a trusted advisor, and they want to look for insightful information that comes early on. So there is a lot of emphasis in lines of what is my key risks. So right now, and when we go there with a post-mortem approach to audit, that's not the only thing that management is looking for. They're already looking at the internal auditors to come up with what's the emerging risks. Can you come and tell us what is going to come and hit us? So in a brief way, there is some element of the risk management also that the internal auditor takes on as a multiple hat. Yes, of course, in a larger audit function, in a larger organizations, pardon me, so there will be a separate enterprise risk management function, quite possibly. But the objective element, that is what differentiates. That objective element coming from the perspective of we being independent professionals and established by a reporting hierarchy, in most often scenarios having an audit committee to which we will report to, that actually gives us that particular independency and transparency that it is properly armed as a governance, which becomes most critical for our board of directors to rely on how the governance is working in the organization. So on that note, so if compliance is not the only aspect anymore, then how can internal audit add value to the organization? What do you think, in your view, internal audit can add as value so that it maximizes so it gives the expectation for our stakeholders? So please poll. I've started getting responses. Okay. So I've just got one response at this point. 2, 3. Okay. Okay. So there are 5 responses. I think, yeah. Okay. Let's assume, okay. Okay. All right. So data analytics Okay, okay. I have few more people coming in. So there are 6 responses. Probably I'll give it another few seconds. Okay, so let's stop it here. So we have 6 people who have responded, and the question was with multiple choice, so you can choose more than one option. It was given with the intent, because it is relevant that we can have more than one here. And data analytics scores high. It scores at 100%. So it's good that all our audience acknowledge that one of the most critical factor that can add value to the internal audit function is analytics. Good to see that. Agile auditing comes 83%, risk management at 50, IT security and privacy at 33. Okay, interestingly, nobody chose soft skills. So we've taken that for granted. That's very nice to see, no? Because especially when as internal auditors, we are jack of all trades, considered master of none. We are master of one internal audit. But when we go and counter our auditees who very well know what they are doing, but we really have to go and challenge them, the most thing that comes handy is soft skills. So I don't see that. That's interesting, of course. Okay. So let's move on. So I thought, let me also give a little bit of insight on how the maximizing internal audit value is. So these are the elements. It's part of a competency survey that IIA and Deloitte have, in collaboration with Deloitte, has done. And this is a survey outcome in terms of the competency gap. So what internal audit function perceives as important competencies that should be there in internal audit function, and where is the gap in terms of our competencies? So interestingly, in an environment where the business fundamentals have not changed, but the business is more driving and thriving towards technology, and we're talking about cloud, we're talking about RPA, we're talking about blockchain, but we are interestingly seeing the gap there. The number of the respondents in that survey was not less. It was 1181 respondents. And if you see that the gap that is being looked at is in the lines of agile auditing, fraud assessments and investigations, soft skills, risk management, security and privacy, data analytics, and IT control framework. Very interesting about data analytics is it's by itself a winning strategy, and it is also one of the fundamentals for other winning strategies to actually win. No, like what I'm trying to say is, if we are talking about agile auditing, yes, it's particularly these days, internal audit functions are talking more and more about agile auditing, how we can respond quickly to any environment changes, and how agile the function is to be able to do that responses. Not anymore that we sit with a 3-year audit plan, which doesn't have to go for much changes, and we go and just perform compliance audits or perform the audits as per the 3-year plan, not much of changes to happen. That's not anymore what is expected. The dynamics within which the business operates, pandemic by itself, that has brought in a completely different dynamics, where the cost has suddenly, where there has been a lot of emphasis for costs to go down. We've seen a complete stoppage, aviation being an industry which has been significantly impacted. So we were impacted as an MRO. We fired within 1 year. So that's the kind of impact that pandemic had. And when those dynamics change, hired 100 people, but fired within 6 months another 100 people, would be an interesting look from an internal audit perspective to see, interestingly, was these decisions taken wisely? Has there been critical succession planning resources also let go? Then how is the talent management functioning? So when things come back as a business, and are we adapt? Are we efficient enough? How strong is the recruitment function? So to be able to think so many things, do so many things at a time, what becomes important is data. So data and information becomes critical, and there is only so much you can do based on just conversational and inputs they received from management teams. So the validation, risk indicators becomes a key element when it comes to for internal auditors to prioritize which area now becomes more important to perform an audit. And even there, the data analytics plays a significant role. So when the recruitments have gone up and the attrition rates have suddenly gone up to around 20% or 30%, so there is a retrenchment happening from from the organization side, but there is also voluntary attritions. That is a very interesting composition to look at. But how are we going to be able to look at it? If we are going to do sampling, that's not going to give us that perspective. We are going to be able to look at it only when we are going to be able to analyze that attrition based on the reasons. So when it comes to those analysis, that is where the data analytics becomes more and more significant. A little bit of insight on the agile auditing, how that is perceived in the internal audit environment, how departments are adapting themselves to an agile auditing, whether they are seeing it as a methodology itself. So that survey was actually an interesting one. It has been done by Gartner. There were 580 internal audit professionals who were contributing to the survey response. And you'll see how much they have adopted the agile principles into their internal audit. 34% says not implementing agile yet. So we have a fully agile is only 8%. 14% adopt a toolbox approach, and 44% is like the ones who are in the majority category. So we become agile on a project by project basis. So we see the specific areas where we want to adopt the agile element, and some insights of how the functions are responding to agile is they come up with a 6-month plan, a 6-month firm plan, and a 6-month tentative plan. So in that tentative plan, probably if your FTE is going to say that there will be 4 audits you can do, then you come up with a tentative plan with a ranking of 8 audits. And you say that this is tentative, but this is where we see, and it's going to be completely dependent on how the dynamics transpire, where which one prioritizes. So we will be taking from this pool, the 4 engagements. So they go to the audit committee with, so if they wanted to plan 8 engagements, they go with a 4 firm and 4 tentative out of a bucket list of 12. So this is one way of looking at agile. There are other ways. So there are other ways where you only go with a 6-month plan and you do risk assessment every 6 months. So this would be particularly relevant for industries where the dynamics of risks change very quickly. So when the inherent risks are pretty constant. So in those environments, this is not something where we would see. We will most often adopt the first approach, which I mentioned, where you have your plan a little bit agile to give an opportunity for an agile principle to be adopted in your plan per se. So in other environments which are extremely more volatile, probably more relevant for stockbroking sort of companies, where the risk itself is very, very high and the volatility is very high. So in other environments, most often the risk assessment is probably done on an annual basis. At least that is basically the minimum that gets done. So there is an extensive risk assessment exercise. And it's very interesting how the risk assessment gets done as well. And that there also data analytics plays a significant role, because you can have risk assessments which goes with risk rating guides that are more based on subjective qualitative guides. So a high, medium, low, simply based on the professional judgment, or a high, medium, low with quantifiable metrics. So if you have to give an example, like let's go with the same attrition rate. So if the key attrition rate goes beyond a particular threshold, then it becomes high. So how this actually happens is, against every risk definition, there is a key risk indicator that is identified. So that key risk indicator is kind of agreed with the business. And for that key risk indicator, there is data that is always being analyzed. And when that indicator will breach its thresholds, and based on that breach, the ratings get changed. Especially in an environment where enterprise risk management is also something which is functional, or in smaller organizations, what you see is there will be dual hats, which is the case with our organization in Sanat as well. I wear 2 hats. I'm also the enterprise risk management coordinator. So what becomes important is to segregate the role between internal audit and ERM. That's a topic for another time. It is possible but let's keep it as a topic for another time. When we talk about internal audit, data analytics, now time for a quick survey to see how much people are already using analytics. So please give in your inputs. I just have one response, 2 so far. 3. I'll give it a few seconds because we had 6 respondents last time. 4. 4 it is. Don't see any more the numbers going up or down. So 50% have said that I use IDEA, but my usage is basic. 25% I use IDEA and my usage is advanced. Okay, we have someone who can actually, Jairam, so for you to note down, so there is somebody in this audience who can be your next speaker. I do not use IDEA, but I use other analytic applications. Okay, I use Excel, is nobody here. So we are having an elite group who are already using tools, no, which is just when they are in their internal audit function, it's just not limited to Excel. They are using tools. No, that's it's good to see. So using analytics. So now that we know that our group is already elite, this is something which will be child's play if I'm going to spend too much time on internal audit life cycle and how data analytics gets used in each of these aspects. No, so I think so I would have to keep it at a very high level in terms of the benefits it gives. So, but it is something which our audience already know and they would be already seeing as a benefit. It does save a lot of our time. It most importantly, something not mentioned here, but I was worth mentioning, is the audit risk that gets minimized by using data analytics. Because the data integrity is something which is a baseline to doing analytics, and that's something which gets managed better when we are using a tool. And that audit risk is all the more minimized when our population coverage is increased. So without dwelling too much time into something which is known to our audience, I will move on to how data analytics is something which has to be a structured one for it to be successful. All of us can be doing analytics. The thread that we carry is basically in the lines of it has to be followed with a structured approach to get the right outcome. So that is most critical to be able to get the required benefit of doing data analytics. Everybody can say we are doing analytics, but what becomes important is to follow them clearly in the 5 stages of defining the question, obtaining the relevant data, clean and normalize your data, analyze data, and communicate results. And in each of these stages, we do face challenges. And each of these stages, there are going to be things that we need to dwell into in terms of bringing about clarity. For example, let's take scope. It should be very clear in what is the scope of coverage that we want. What is the question? What am I trying to achieve with the data that I have taken? Because otherwise, what I will be doing is probably doing a match. I will be running it with other data sets. I will be joining a couple of databases. But probably but all that effort might be futile if I don't know what I want to finally achieve as an outcome. So what I want to establish from that analytics. So when I'm performing an internal audit, let's assume I'm in the fieldwork stage and let's probably take HR data. And in HR data, so I want to see, so in HR data, there are so many things I can see. But I'll have to be very clear on what basically I want to cover. Let's assume I want to cover overtime. But what in overtime? Overtime, I can cover whether the overtime got charged correctly. I can cover whether the overtime got paid correctly. I can see whether there are ghost employees to whom overtime is paid, but each of this is a particular question. It's a question by itself. And why? Because if it is ghost employees, then I'll my analysis of data of overtime, my emphasis is more on the employee number and the employee name and doing some fuzzy duplicates around that. But if my overtime is about paid correctly, then my emphasis is more around taking the data from the payment record separately as well and doing a match. Whether my overtime accruals are correct, that's the most interesting one. If I haven't thought about this question early on, I would be finding a challenge in taking the relevant data itself, because I will need attendance records and I will need to see how that particular attendance records are maintained. So what I will see as challenges as I go along in terms of doing my analytics. So defining the question becomes very, very critical for that purposes. Then obtaining the relevant data. So now this is interesting. A lot of times we know what we need, but when we reach out to the auditee, they are not going to be providing that data. If we are internal function, the good thing that we have is, yeah, good, we can rely directly on our IT, or we can have, if our analytics is reached its maturity, then we can have it linked with the Oracle or SAP to extract data ourselves. But obtaining it relevant becomes important more in the lines of also the right period, where exactly the sourcing is coming from, whether it's coming from Oracle or whether it is coming from Excel, whether it is for the audit period or the coverage area that we are looking for. These become important, and not forgetting as well. For example, it can be that I'm taking the employee master. Okay, for overtime, I've taken the employee master. Overtime data is also coming. But I want to also see it by department, and this employee master file which they gave me, they are giving me only restricted fields. Then my relevant data has not come in. So it would be there, but ultimately, if I don't have the full-fledged information, then my analytics cannot be performed. The third one as a stage is the most critical: clean and normalized data. Because as much as the data has come in, whether the quality of data that I have brought in and whether the cleaning up that is required, has it been performed or not? No, this is where I recollect the 2 days of session, and Jairam, every time he will start with that, he will say, let's look at the field statistics first. No, it's one of the most important thing to see whether, as external audit assurance requirements also, when we are taking as an external auditor, what would they do? They will first check the balance between the GL and sub GL, whether the balance numbers are matching or not. Then only the next step goes whether that particular data can be taken or not. So cleaning and then normalizing it. For example, if the fields are different, for example, the dates are different, then to normalize those date formats. The good thing about using IDEA is smart enough to understand by the flow of data, the format itself. Then you can just do the field mask. And with that, you have, when you're joining your tables, you can do the field mask and you can join your data sources. So that way, using tools, which is a limitation, something which we will not have in Excel, versus having it in IDEA, this is something which we benefit from. Then the analyzing data. When we analyze is when we come up with a lot of challenges, because that's really, sometimes even challenges whether my relevant data has come through or not. So I'm going to probably talk about the analyzing and communicating results with a scenario. So in our internal audit, so I've just taken a scenario of something which we've recently been working on. So we had to see we were looking at the operations, which is the maintenance, repair, and overhauling of aircraft engines. So we were seeing how the operations were performing and how they were doing their labor efficiency management. So the question, what we wanted to see is, okay, we independently perform a labor efficiency exercise and we match with their KPIs to see whether their KPIs are reflecting correctly or not. So we wanted to do a test of our own and to see and compare it with their operational KPIs to see whether the results are matching or not. The adequacy and appropriateness of the scope and testing strategy becomes the initial challenges when you're defining the question. And that's something which is linked to your audit objectives itself. Know what is the objective that you want to achieve out of that particular audit? What are the risks you are covering? So is that particular objective you are defined for the analytics, that is something aligned with your audit objective? That's something you need to see at that point. So once you've defined what you need, then the relevant data. So here, the relevant data for us was to take the attendance records. So what's interesting is it is going to be shifts. So now there will be shift data. It will probably be on weekly basis. There will be different modes of data that we were getting. We were getting weekly data sets. There were some, the roster data or the labor hour booking. So basically when it comes to the booking hours against work orders. So what's interesting is if you're seeing an engine, so the engine comes as one, it's one visit. So we call it a visit because it's like, no, it's a visit, it's coming for, it's paying as a visit. Let's know in the lighter sense of things. So that master visit of that engine is broken down into child visits. And the child visits will be further broken down into work orders, and work orders will have operational levels. So these are the dynamics of how it flows from the operations standpoint. So how does the booking happen? So there will be attendance, which will be basically a time clock. So people swipe their card. So there is an attendance start and end time, but it's all an ERP system. So with the start and end time, that is just the daily attendance record. And there will also be a production data where against a work order, people are booking time. So what is interesting to see there when it comes to cleaning and normalizing data is, are we seeing the same data sets? No, the challenges that comes up with it is, for example, hours. The hours can be reflected in the time format, or it can be reflected as numbers. So when it comes to the attendance records, we were getting it with the time format. And when it comes to the booking, it was based on numbers. This is something which has to get normalized. Dates is the easy thing. It's something which can be, just with a field mask that can be addressed. So that's something which we've seen as two challenges to, first of all, normalize and clean the data that we have. Then came the interesting element of analyzing this data. When we were analyzing the data, that is when we came across with, okay, to start with, to match them by the date, the staff number, the staff name and number, and the work order reference. Now, why this becomes relevant is the attendance is based on shifts. So it can be that my shift ends on Friday, but that particular work ends only on Saturday. So the work order data, the labor booking is going to be far beyond the attendance. And what challenge it is going to throw? It's going to throw the cutoff challenge, because if I'm taking 1 month, end of month, I will be having some open visits where I would have still recorded time. And when I'm taking a postmortem record, as of today, when I'm taking that record, I'm taking that record for that particular work order. Even if I'll have to be able to apply date, but that would be a limitation of the data itself. So without being able to apply date, then how do I have the right match between the two datas? So how we took a call is to take only visits that have come and gone. So we will only analyze those engines which came and exited as well. So anything which is in WIP, we will eliminate. So that's actually one of the bases we took as cutoff to be able to kind of normalize what data we were looking at. What benefit is knowing when it comes to the communicating results? So the biggest benefit that data analytics gives, which others will not give, is that audit trail that comes with the analytics. So you can walk through every particular step and activity that has been performed through that data and that output to your auditee, so that your conclusive evidence is not challenged by the auditee. Because here, let's not forget the question which we started with is a question of we doing an efficiency test of our own and matching it with the KPIs which the operations have. And we obviously came out with results which were different from theirs. So which did throw out a little bit of challenge. So that's basically something which most of you would have also faced in your environment. So not quite sure if you're. I can quickly switch to idea to say show one or two of that project analysis. Is my data screen visible?
Yes, Anusha. It just came and went actually. We've lost the screen sharing.
How about now?
Yes, we can see idea. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So if you see here, this is, for example, the labor analysis data. And what we had to do is basically to go about identifying the type of booking, because when we wanted to analyze with their KPIs, what they are looking at is revenue hours and idle hours. So then we'll have to also look in the lines of what is revenue and what is idle. So we had to go and look at what is the visit type and categorize the idle and revenue based on the type of visit. If it was using any Excel, I don't know how much time it will take for us to even if you're running a VLOOKUP, we would be running VLOOKUP with one match at a time. We had to also match the profit center and the employee department. So once we did this exercise by trying to normalize the data, then we went about to do an analysis of revenue versus idle versus tools. So tools is basically where calibration of tools is happening. That is something which we want to see separately from revenue, because that's how the operations were also seeing. So we wanted to see it. And these were the summarizations were in the lines of seeing it as totals or seeing it by department. So I'm not going to go too much into the details of it, but so this basically is one of the exercises. Something similar is between the standard versus actual hours. So we wanted to analyze. The challenge that it was throwing to us was that there can be routine work which will have standard hours, but there can be some non-routine work also. The non-routine work quite obviously will not have a predefined standard hour in it. So that would mean we'll have to, if we're going to compare the standard hours, the particular engine which would have come, it would have had some routine work, it would have had some over and above non-routine work, but we have to eliminate that over and above non-routine work and look at the routine and match it with the standard hours and study the deviation. So just to give a little bit of perspective of how we've been using IDEA. Let me just go back to my screen. Okay. So other usages of how we've been using it. So we've been using it for also in the quite obviously the favorite topic, procurement. So supply chain is an area we've been using it quite extensively. We want in terms of doing the lead time tests. When it comes to procurement lead time, where we want to run. So this is something where I was very interested in looking at the macros function. In fact, thank you, Jairam, for sharing us with it. That's something which we are incorporating. So data analytics can be taken to various levels. So it can be embedded basically into specific audits that we are seeing, but it can be a standalone activity as well. It all depends on what the expectations of our stakeholders is. So we can have data analytics scripts that can be run at periodic intervals, where the results are given to the respective auditees, especially if there is if you don't have analytic functions sitting within their respective departments. This is something that the internal audit functions can look at as a value-added service, and it also contributes as a huge winning strategy to get the buy-in from stakeholders. Where you can have some scripts developed. You don't have to do a major task. You can do it once and then you can run it as macros. So you run those scripts, you give those results, You give, so they can test whether they are false positives or not. So you can run the scripts basically more in the lines of any journal entries that is passed by unauthorized users. You can run the scripts for scripts that have been like invalid, the account postings that have not gone to the right, especially expense reimbursements that have been handled by finance teams. Any duplicate journal entries that have been passed. Gap assessments for invoice numbers, JVs. So gap assessments, even for any purchase requisitions or purchase orders, to perform those gap assessments and give it. Any reversals? No, interestingly, journal entry reversals are very interesting things to see where exactly those reversals have gone in. So in revenue, and looking at the revenue numbers and whether there are any reversals through JVs, that's something we can look at. That's also an area where you can actually do an analysis, or you can do any periodic runs and give results to your teams, your businesses. So this is something which you have to start engaging with your stakeholders in terms of getting to understand what they need. So that becomes important. So one of the key things that you can do is to have those stakeholder meetings at periodic intervals. So we don't, sometimes some departments don't see it's that important to run the roadshows, but roadshows have helped a lot when it comes to getting the people to understand what internal audit does. We are not always the watchdogs. No, not bloodhound. They see us as bloodhounds. So no, it's not necessarily the case. Is how we will actually behave, and we can we give that support. So audit is a bread and butter, and we have to give that objective assurance, but at the same time to establish that friendliness, which is much required for getting the cooperation from our auditees. There are so many value-added services that we can do without conflicting our independence. And one of the key ways of doing it is data analytics. So with that message, I would leave the floor open for questions. Happy to take on.
Thank you, Anusha. Very, very nice presentation. And I like the way you peppered your presentation with a bit of internal audit humor every now and then. That's very important. Friends, we've got a very experienced speaker. I must tell you, I'm not just saying this to flatter her because she's our speaker for this evening, but I've very seldom seen audit heads who have got hands-on working experience with IT, and it was very heartening to see Anusha attend a full-fledged training program for 2 days with us. So you have someone who's not only about talking about it, but leading about it with example, with actual demonstration and action. So if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat box, and we have some time. We'll be happy to have it answered. Anusha, while we wait for questions from the group, I do have one question to you. I've kind of got a sense of the journey you've made so far with data analytics at the Sanat group. What do you see what's the road ahead for the next 6 months? So, and I especially ask that from the capability maturity model point of view, where we talk about ad hoc analytics, repetitive analytics, continuous auditing. So my question is, what do you see as the group head? What is your vision for the road ahead on data analytics? And part B to the question is, how do you feel you're going to skill both yourself and your team to take on that role?
Okay. That's you've hit really where exactly we are working on at this point. So we identified one of our initiatives for our function scorecard as well, that we will come up with a data analytic guideline for the function. So what we intend to cover as a guideline is a roadmap for the analytics, because currently the analytics is limited to specific engagements that we are doing, where we are adopting the analytics as part of the planning activity. We incorporate, we identify which areas can be covered with analytics, whether it is linking to our audit objectives, and we are performing those tests. So what's the next step is to take it to the real-time analysis. So real-time audits, where we want to reach to is continuous auditing. But the roadmap for it is going to depend also on the maturity of the organization. So as we see, the next 6 months, The target is to get, first of all, the framework in place, have the buy-in from our stakeholders. We want to see real-time auditing coming in next year, at least early next year, so that it takes to the next level, so that we can target continuous auditing the following year.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. Excellent. Anusha, there's a question from Vinay Karve, a very interesting question, and I'm sure you would be able to the best suited to address it because his question has the element of risk in it.
Okay.
His question is, how will data analytics help in understanding the present scenario and also identify future risk elements?
Okay. So this goes back into what I was mentioning in during the session about having key risk indicators. So when it comes to understanding risks, so it doesn't limit with profiling risks. Ranking risks becomes critical, and those ranks can vary depending on the particular an uncertain event. It's already, risk is an uncertain event at the end of it.
Correct.
So for that uncertain event, you can only have indicators based on which you can see whether that risk is already a reality.
Yes.
So if you're saying a change in the economic situation, because of which that I can have a drop in my revenue, I'll have to see what would be my best indicator. Probably my indicator is inflation, or my indicator is fuel prices. Then I'll have to keep a threshold of above this, what would be my risk indicator figure that is going to impact my revenue. So if I'm saying if dollar will have a significant impact, dollar at 78.3 right now for us. So if 78 becomes 82, what's going to be my revenue impact? Is that high, medium, or low? So this is the key risk indicator metric that has to come with your risk. And it's likewise for your emerging risks. What becomes critical is for you to identify emerging risks over the next 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years at the minimum.
Okay.
I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, very good. There's a very interesting question, definitely for someone who loves cricket on YouTube. And this question is, there are certain cricketers who come in as pinch hitters and they fire away a couple of sixes in an over. So how do you ensure that you're sustaining analytics more like a MS Dhoni, who is very consistent in his performance and not be one of the pinch hitters who fires away in a few overs and then it fizzles out? So I think the question largely is, what's the framework you put in place to sustain the analytics through the year? And I think that's a very good point for you.
Yeah. No, fair. It's a very fair point. No, and that's really where our analytics and scripts and macros comes into play. So how you can maintain the consistency is I would probably take this question more in the lines of whoever has raised the question, a little more insight on what they are looking at as whether they are looking at with risks or whether they are looking at it with audit or data analytics by itself. That's not something which I'm able to understand clearly from the question, but I'm assuming it is based on risk. Then if it is basically based on risk, then it's all about putting that frequency in. So you put 3 months once you assess your metric. And what is the measure you will take? Because risk doesn't stop with identifying risk, whether high, medium, low. And it's obviously it is an ERM function or it is a business owner's responsibility for the mitigations to work. But identifying the mitigations is part of the exercise. So to maintain performance is to make sure that that particular mitigation flag, so once the risk flags up and its rating goes higher, the mitigation comes into play.
Right. Good one. I think we can take one final question, and this again is a very nice question to hit the ball out of the park, both in terms of the cricket example. It seems to be from someone who probably has worked both in audit and IT. The question is, how do you extend collaboration with IT in your group when IT at times can be threatened by the power of data analytics you wield, which they should traditionally be wielding? I think it's a very
It's an often faced challenge because especially the business will obviously be. If I'm sitting in a CEO meeting as a clear-cut example, and that CEO, if internal audit can give me this, why you as a business have not produced this? No, it's an obvious question. Then that there is something where you've broken the trust of your peers. So tomorrow you're not going to build the support. That's something to be managed very interestingly. So it's important that we collaborate early on so that the IT understands where we stand and why we do what we do. And that collaboration and communication is the best way to manage this.
Good one. I think that's very, very well answered. Anusha, before we extend a vote of thanks to you, if you can place your mail ID, either your personal mail ID or your Sanat mail ID in the chat box, it will allow some of the attendees who are interested to learn a bit more about your experience to connect with you offline and maybe pose some questions to you. So that's one thing you can do.
Okay. I have too many screens open, so
can I probably? Yeah, you would like.
I got it.
You got it. Wonderful.
So share my email ID.
Great.
Feel free to connect. You can also connect through LinkedIn. So I'm more active on LinkedIn, so you can drop me a message on LinkedIn. And happy to have the conversation going.
Excellent. So Anusha, we are true to just in time. We are just a few minutes away from the end of the session. On behalf of SAMA Audit Systems and Softwares, a special thanks to you for taking up this opportunity. We really enjoyed your share, your insights. You took us through a very interesting journey which you've taken up, and being part of the journey with Asta and you, we've understood the kind of benefits you've received and the efforts you're taking. So we wish you both well in your journey and your team members. And once again, thank you so much for taking up this speaking assignment. It was really a treat and a pleasure. And wish you a wonderful evening ahead.
Thank you, Jairam, and thank you to all the audience for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Anusha.
To connect. Thank you.
Thank you, audience, and look forward to meeting you on the next Wednesday for yet another engaging session. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you, Anusha. Thank you, Asta. Thank you, everyone online. See you.
See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.